Prominent conservatives attend a screening of Dinesh D'Souza's latest film, Death of a Nation. One America's Jack Posobiec spoke with D'Souza and others about the film and why Democrat policies have historically been dangerous.
We're with Dinesh D'Souza, the filmmaker, tonight. Tell me, what made you want to make this film at this time?
Well, I realize we're living in a moment of craziness in American politics, and I'm a product of the Reagan era, and I thought to myself, wow, poor Reagan, if he was here, would be disappointed. He'd be heartbroken, I think. He'd be a fish out of water, because the waters are too roiled. But then it occurred to me that Lincoln would not. Lincoln would recognize what's going on, because the waters were even more roiled in his time, and in Lincoln's time, you had a major political party, hey, it happened to be the Democratic Party, which would not abide by the result of a free election and was willing to go crazy, drive the country, break the country into two if necessary. There were Democratic calls at that time to assassinate Lincoln, get rid of him, quote, by any means necessary. So there's a haunting and eerie similarity between the period leading up to the Civil War, not the Civil War itself, but the pre-Civil War era and our own moment.
So I guess my next question is, do you think history will repeat itself?
No, I'm hoping that it won't, and I'm hoping the point of our movie is to avert the situation getting out of hand. But nevertheless, we're living in an America now, which I didn't see in the 80s and 90s. Americans of different points of view, not arguing, but going to blows, threatening each other, trying to get each other fired, destroying people's careers. There's a savagery in American politics, I think, that is a departure from Reagan's era of gentleman's politics.
So how do we get back to that more genteel sort of era?
So here I think the debate becomes very tricky, because in my opinion, there are activists on the left who have been doing these things because they get away with them. So if you're Antifa and you're able to drive speakers, starting with Condoleezza Rice on down, off the campus, and if it works, if you succeed, you're going to keep doing it. So the only way for you to stop is for you to face a serious penalty for what you're doing.
I've been out hearing the left talking about all these things, fascism, Nazism on the right, and when you look at the actual history of how these things evolved, and when you actually look at that platform versus the platform of the modern left, you say, wait a minute, those two are really heavily aligned and frankly contrary to the right. And so it's really more about just having actual real history being out there. When people talk about these things, you can't just spew that because someone told you that in a history class, when academia and everything has been so influenced and so wrongly influenced by left. So I think it's important just to have that message out there based on actual facts, based on actual history, because it's just not what we've been told. And I think when you look at the movie, you'll see that there is a very distinct and clear difference between what actually happened and what is being sold to our youth today.
And how is it that we could really off-ramp what's going on today, sort of reduce that negativity and get back to a place where we're not trying to, attack everyone all the time?
Well, I think you just got to talk about the facts. You got to talk about the history. You got to look at the platforms. I mean, one of the most interesting things, I put it out on my social last night, was when I was watching the movie before this to make sure, hey, am I coming to something that makes sense? Is, you see the Nazi platform in the early 1930s and what was actually put out there as there, and you look at it compared to like the DNC platform of today, and you're saying, man, those things are awfully similar to a point where it's actually scary. And I mean, to me, that was one of the most striking things I took from the movie, and it's because it's the exact opposite of what you've been told. When you have, a bunch of kids in dreadlocks running around screaming about fascism and all these things, it's like, wait a second, have you actually taken a history class? Do you actually know what these words mean that you're running around and spewing? And I think they don't. But they're able to get away with that because academia, mainstream media, they'll sell the same false narrative, and they've been doing it effectively for quite some time. So I think people really have to see that, people have to realize that, and I think it's going to be something that will help motivate people on the right to say, enough, to actually fight, to do what my father's doing, which is to stand up, just to say what he actually believes, not just what he's supposed to say, to get those, against false narrative points.
And I appreciate the way Dinesh is pointing out that it was the Democratic Party who supported slavery, it was the Democratic Party who supported the Jim Crow laws and segregation. The Civil Rights Act would not have passed if not for the Republican Party, and I'm proud that my family was one of the few in Virginia that were Republicans at least since the 1940s. And it was at a time when in our part of the country you could put all the Republicans in a phone booth. And so I appreciate that part of what Dinesh is so wisely pointed out, and people have been scared to say before.
Now, how do you think this movie's effect will play out? I mean, do you think this will really start to lower tensions on both sides, or?
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie yet, so I don't know. But I think it's based on a premise. It's based on a historical fact that people need to understand, and I think Democrats to this day want to keep poor people down, want to keep them dependent on the government, want to break up their families so they have to depend on the government. And I don't think it's much different than what they were doing in before the 1860s with slavery.
A lot of people have pointed out that socialism is a form of slavery, but with a different master.
No question about it. I just think it's designed to get votes for the Democratic Party, to keep people dependent on the government, and I'm proud of Dinesh for exposing that.
Thank you very much for talking with us.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.